Welcome to the FactionWarfare.com Guide to Running Missions. This will be a quick and dirty tutorial showing what, where, and how to do them, and enable you to earn a steady income for both combat ships and your monthly Plex subscription. I go by the handle Subsparx and Eve, and I will be the presenter for this tutorial. Faction Warfare missions, regardless of where you get them, take you and usually start in low-sec space. The goals of the missions always take place in enemy territory. By this, I do not simply mean systems that are controlled by the enemy, but systems that are on the opposite side of the war zone. The LP payout is far higher than standard missions depending on tier, and payout from stations in low-sec is greater than in high-sec. Additionally, items in the store are cheaper. Mission targets tend to be large, such as battleships and industrials, and you do not need to clear the entire mission to finish. Faction Warfare missions are located at Faction Warfare stations. You can use the Agent Finder to locate these missions. To do so, sort by your faction, then your Faction Warfare Corporation. For Amar, it's the 24th Imperial Crusade. For Caldari, the State Protectorate. For Galante, the Federal Defense Union. And finally for Minmatar, the Tribal Liberation Force. Regardless of the standings you have to these agents, you must actively be in Faction Warfare in order to receive missions from them. Faction Warfare missions pay out a substantial amount more than normal missions, but they really come into their own as far as risk versus reward once you hit level 4. This requires a standing of 5.0 to your Faction Warfare Corporation to run them. Using Tier 2 as a baseline, as there is no bonus or penalty, level 4 missions give you approximately 19,000 or more LP. As you scale up and down in tier, you gain bonuses or penalties to mission payouts. The graph you see here is with the skill Security Connections at level 4. If you have it lower or higher, you will see an adjustment to your mission earnings. At Tier 1, you are looking at 9,500 LP, Tier 2 is 19,000, Tier 3 is 33,000, Tier 4 is 47,000, and Tier 5 is 61,000. For reference, level 3 missions give 3,500, 7,000, 12,000, 17,500, and 22,750 from Tier 1 through Tier 5 respectively. As you can see, a level 3 mission at Tier 4, which has a 150% LP payout bonus, doesn't even pay as much as a baseline level 4 at Tier 2. The tier bonuses and penalties are 50% earned at Tier 1, Tier 2 is standard payout, Tier 3 is a 75% bonus, Tier 4 is a 150% bonus, and Tier 5 is a 225% bonus. I recommend training social skills to at least 4. When the payouts for missions are this good, you see a huge improvement from social skill bonuses. The main one to look at is Security Connections, which gives a 10% LP gain per level in the skill and is only a 2x skill to train. Items in the LP store cover a large variety of commodities and are very similar to the standard Faction LP stores, with some things only available exclusively to Faction Warfare, such as the Caldari Navy Scorpion. Items are additionally available at a very sharp discount. For example, a Navy Drake costs 250,000 LP in the Caldari Navy LP store, but it only costs 100,000 LP in the State Protectorate one. When you combine the high LP income of Faction Warfare missions with the discounted shop prices, you can earn a lot of money in a very short period of time, for low risk if you're using something like a stealth bomber to get to and from missions. Shown here is a graph of common items purchased in the LP store, specifically ships. The Navy Raven costs 400,000 less LP for State Protectorate than the Caldari Navy. All ships are at a minimum of 50% off in the State Protectorate store, some drastically more so, such as the Hookbill, which costs 87.5% less. Ship fitting is an important part of running missions, especially if you are in a stealth bomber. I'm on the Caldari side, so this video will be focusing primarily on fits for the Manticore. However, please feel free to chime in on the thread at FactionWarfare.com and I will add fits into the column for running missions for each side. NPCs and missions use a lot of electronic warfare, therefore it is necessary to build your fits and ways to combat this. Amar have to deal with NPCs using target painters. The Minmatar ships they go up against also use both artillery and missiles, so you have to combat this with range. It's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to sig tank these missions with an afterburner fit bomber, so you will likely need to have Tech 2 torpedoes you can hit with javelins from outside of the NPC range. Caldari have to deal with NPCs using sensor damps. To counter this, you need to use sensor boosters with targeting range scripts. Due to the Galante NPCs in these missions using hybrid turrets, they can be easily tanked using an afterburner and maintaining your transversal velocity. Only a couple missions are exceptions to this rule, such as Uproot, which has you attacking a space station which has missile turrets located towards the front of it. Galante had to deal with Caldari NPCs not only using full-blown ECM, but missiles. SIG tanking is incredibly difficult with this, and you generally have to fit ECCM to stop yourself from losing lock frequently. The best solution for these missions, like Amar, is to fit a microwarp drive and Tech 2 torpedo launchers with javelins and try to stay outside of the range of the enemy NPCs entirely. Minimatar, sometimes referred to as Farm Matar, have to deal with NPCs hitting them with tracking disruptors. Considering those have no effect on missiles, they have many options to run missions very easily. This is a fit designed to SIG tank using an afterburner instead of a microwarp drive. The reason for this is it takes significant time to train into Tech 2 torpedoes, so by SIG tanking with an afterburner, you can remain at closer range and hit with shorter range faction missiles. You can skill into this particular setup in around a month. Simply orbiting at 60 kilometers should suffice for this fit. With 3 sensor boosters running, you will very rarely, if ever, lose lock on the target. You absolutely must have level 4 missile bombardment and missile projection skills. Both of these skills increase range by 10% apiece, either through missile velocity or flight time. You need these skills in order to get your range up to 60 kilometers. For extra bling and safety, once you feel comfortable with running missions in a bomber, you can upgrade the afterburner with a Gisty model. This will enable you to go faster and tank the missions better at a relatively low investment cost. I will be showcasing this fit when I run the missions during this video, fit with a Gisty B-type afterburner. Once you have Tech 2 torpedo launchers, you can use Javelin missiles, which can hit out to 120 kilometers and still over 100 kilometers with just level 4 support skills. NPCs only have a 90 kilometer range for sensor damps, so this can hit from outside of that range. You still, however, need the sensor boosters to be able to lock things from this range, as a single sensor damp from this far out can quickly make things untargetable. The range you are kiting at is also outside the maximum range of the enemy guns, making this a relatively safe way to run missions, aside from the initial part of pulling range. I suggest getting a faction microwarp drive like a Gisty for the smaller SIG radius increase so that you can pull range quickly with less chance of being hit. Missions in faction warfare are picked up just like standard missions. Go to a militia station, talk to an agent, and accept the mission from there. When you are running missions in bombers, you want to avoid missions that require you to pick up items. Those can and likely will get you killed the second you stop moving at a cargo container. Another mission I personally avoid is Rortiest Rage. That mission does not have an acceleration gate, meaning people can warp in on you without you having a warning from D-scan ahead of time. It also means that people can warp in cloaked and stay cloaked. If an agent gives you a mission you don't like, you can decline up to 1 time per 4 hours per agent to try and get one you would like to run. Since missions in faction warfare take you to the opposite side of the war zone, you generally want to pick up more than one at a time. There are a finite number of systems in faction warfare, therefore the more missions you grab at once, the denser the missions will be located to each other. It is not unusual if you pick up a bunch of missions at once to get 2 or more of them in a single system. This results in longer time spent out doing missions, but faster overall turn-ins. Using Onamon as an example, let's say you pick up a level 4 mission that requires you to blow something up in Dastrans. That's 12 jumps there and 12 back, 24 total. If you want to run 8 missions, that comes out to 192 jumps. Well over half of your time doing these missions will be spent jumping back and forth. Now let's grab missions in bulk. Caldari currently owns 8 low-sec systems that provide missions. I ignore high-sec aside from my start point of Onamon as the payouts are lower. Creating an autopilot route between all of the stations, then running optimized route like this on it, results in 29 jumps. That's barely more than running a single mission. You'll likely also want to adjust your route planner. I use less secure, as I don't like it dipping me back out into high-sec, as high-sec to low-sec gates are often camped. Now we have 8 missions. Several of these missions may have destinations to the same system or nearby systems. As you can see from these payouts, the mission I grabbed in Onamon pays out a fairly significant amount less than any of the other missions I picked up. So at this point, we would create a new route for the next missions. So let's just make a quick assumption of 40 jumps to complete. We're now up to 69 jumps, and if we add a return trip to Onamon of at most probably 20 jumps, we're up to 89. That's less than half the number of jumps it would take to run them all from a single station. One of the reasons this works is, unlike standard missions, you can turn in faction warfare missions at any station for your faction. All of these State Protectorate missions I have right now can all be turned in remotely in Onamon. It just so happens to also be a great station to then cash out LP from and then contract a haul to Jita. In the last part, I mentioned creating and optimizing a mission route. Open up all of the missions from the Agent tab and set all of their locations as waypoints. Now run Optimize. We have a route of 23 jumps, which is nearly half of our previous estimate of 40. Make sure that when you're making the plan for mission locations that you use Prefer Less Secure as your autopilot route. When you are over in systems on the other side, you do not want autopilot sending you into high-sec. You are unable to cloak your bomber in unfriendly high-sec systems, which will end up getting you killed. Once this is done, choose what station you want to turn them in at and set that as the final waypoint. I will be using Onamon in my example, as that's my high-sec staging point. With both 23 and 15 added to the initial pickup route of 29, we now have 67 jumps, which is a decent amount better than the original estimate of 89. Once you get to a system that you have a mission in, there are several things you want to do. Faction Warfare missions broadcast a beacon on everybody's overview when you run them, just like Faction Warfare Plexes. Because of this, you don't want to start a mission the second you enter the system. The reasoning is that when you do that, there is a chance that it could be either very close to you or incredibly far, like on the opposite side of a large system like Inia. If that ends up happening, it's quite likely that the faction warfare targets or pirates will get to the acceleration gate before you and point you before you can go inside. Instead, we are going to warp to the sun at 100, or whatever distance you prefer, and cloak up. Since the sun is a central location in the system, you have the best chance of landing before anyone else, without missions spawning and outliers a long distance away. Before you warp to a mission, if you are flying solo, you should form a fleet with yourself. There is a trick with acceleration gates in faction warfare. Many people have difficulties where if they warp to the gates at 0, when they attempt to use them, they start to bounce off the physical object. We don't want this to happen, and then have a neutral Dromio land on us and get point. By forming a fleet, we can now use the various warp at range features without exposing the beacon first by initiating warp, stopping, and then warping to it at range. If you warp to a gate at 10, you still technically land at 0, able to use the acceleration gate immediately. However, you land off of the physical object by a decent amount, and thus won't bounce around trying to enter. Also, if you are doing a mission like Rodiest Rage, which has no gate, warping to it at 10 allows you to remain cloaked, as you'll be 10 kilometers off of the beacon and thus won't uncloak when you land. Remember, other people can do this as well. When you enter the mission, do a quick assessment of the location of enemy NPCs. If they are already in range or close to it, select a target, turn on your propulsion, click the orbit button, or manually orbit depending on mission, lock up, and fire away. Don't forget to enable your electronic warfare countermeasures. If the targets are away outside of range, hit your propulsion mod and immediately begin burning in the direction you need to go. While doing this, you may want to hit the cloak button to cloak up as soon as you get far enough away from the beacon. Be careful not to cancel cloak out, as you have a long timer before reuse. This is not an ideal way to start a mission, as it gives a longer time for undesirables to come in and check out your mission and try to gank you. Be very careful about your transversal velocity in missions. In the mission The Reprisal, the sector commander is very fast, causing my orbit to essentially burn away from the targets. This resulted in my transversal velocity being very low. Because of this, I take a hit during the mission, which with the weak tank of a bomber, takes out 100% of my shields and a portion of my armor in a single blow. As the sector commander is about to go down, I pre-align for the next gate, and once I enter warp, I start to reload my missiles. This way, I don't have to reload them while I'm cloaked somewhere else, and I've already entered warp, so I'm safe. The following mission is Supply Interdiction, which is one of the fastest and easiest missions on the Caldari side. Unlike other missions that require you to kill industrials such as Shades of Grey, which has 6 of them, and Rodiest Rage, which has 7, Supply Interdiction only has 3, which with my skill set and faction missiles means I can clear the entire mission at very low risk and without reloading, as each takes at most 6 shots. I lucked out on this particular set of missions and got 2 supply interdictions for this run, this one and the mission at the very end of my loop. Dead Men Tell No Tales is a mission that requires you to destroy a structure. The description is slightly misleading, saying you have to destroy a tactical relay, but it's actually the tactical command post. This mission is time consuming, but not overly difficult. It's important to keep up directional scanning while you are running missions. If you are in a bomber, you are pretty much defenseless to enemies that come in. D-scan should be checked frequently, at least every 5 seconds. The range is personal preference. I used to watch at 150 million, which is just over 1 AU. However, with the Rubicon expansion, interceptors can land and enter in an incredibly short period of time, so you may want the extra heads up of doing a longer range, such as 600 million or a bit over 4 AUs. If you see something come up on the scanner aligned to a planet, when you are doing missions, you always want to try to be aware of what planets are located where, so you can keep up transversal and weapon range and quickly align out if a threat lands on the gate without your ship stopping and getting hit for significant damage. If this ends up happening and somebody enters your mission, you want to go somewhere within the max range of the directional scanner and point it at the mission beacon and scan for them there. There is a high likelihood that they will decide to hang out in your mission and camp it, so in some cases the best solution is simply to move on to the next mission and come back. At this point, I decide the best course of action is to warp to the acceleration gate at range and create a bookmark during warp a short distance off of the gate. This will allow me to land on the acceleration gate as soon as I have noticed he's leaving the system. The mission I'm doing here is a short one, so I do not need much time to get in, kill the targets, and leave. Since this happens to be the last mission in my queue, I have to play his game in order to finish my mission. After he leaves system, I warp back to continue what I started, only to find that he has burned back to the gate and has come back to try and get a kill. After several unsuccessful attempts to get me, I managed to get to the bookmark I created in time to notice exactly when he leaves my mission. This allowed me to warp in and destroy the final target before he comes back into the system, ending my string of missions for the night. Once back, go ahead and turn all the missions in. Right now I'm sitting at around 325,000 LP, so you will be able to see how well it pays out shortly. Do note, Caldari is currently at tier 3, so there's a 75% LP payout bonus on these missions. Once all of them are turned in, it looks like I've earned another 325,000 LP or so. If you do a quick cash out on something like Caldari Navy Drakes, I can buy 3 and earn around 400 to 450 million ISK payout for something that only took a couple of hours. Pretty significant amount of income for very low risk, and even in the event of a lost bomber, the loss pales in comparison to the payout once you turn the missions in. At tier 3, you should be able to buy a new bomber for every mission you run, so as long as you pay attention to that D-scan, you'll be rolling in ISK and paying for your account with Plex in no time.